This media is brought to you by Polyscope.
In the realm of tomorrow, where techniques mind, we ponder, we dream.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's great to finally meet you face to face because that's how we meet each other face to face nowadays over Zoom. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization and what you're passionate about?
Yeah, my name is Branden Singletary. Don't have much of an organization at the moment, not yet anyway, but what I'm most passionate about is, nature and the world and how exactly it was made in a kind of mechanistic sort of way.
Interesting. So tell me more about that. How do you get to that? It doesn't sound religious at all. It's not religious, right?
Not quite, no. I mean, there are theological undertones, sure, but I think that's inescapable when you're dealing with what things are made of at the lowest level, perhaps. Yes. Um, I don't think there's much I really can say about it without like trailing off into some weird, incomprehensible land.
It's okay. I love weird and incomprehensible lands. That's exactly where we want to go. Those are my favorite places to visit.
All right. Well, in that case, I suppose it would. Guess it's wise to start off with the core idea here. It's that the world necessarily has to have some sort of principle in order to operate, in order to exist. And I think that the core principle has to be something that we can very clearly observe, because I believe that if we can't observe it, we can't talk about it. And if you can't talk about it, then, it probably isn't really a part of the world at all. So what I'm basing the principle off of is the fact that everything seems to be moving based on, basic perception. And, logically, if you want to consider how a world operates, things necessarily have to move in order for it to be a world at all. If it's not, then it's just a blank slate. Nothing's really going on. It may as well just be a perfectly smooth continuum with nothing in it,
Right. So when you say things are moving, in what context? Because when you talk about movement, it's got to be within a context, correct?
Yes, that's exactly it. I believe that movement happens because of contrast and difference. It is, in a sense, kind of like you probably already know that things kind of, there's a symmetry to the world, that there's always a one side and another side. That's what I think difference is.
It's interesting because I was saying that just the other day with symmetry, because I was talking to a writer who wanted to create an alien creature for her book. And I said, do something asymmetrical, because human beings in sort of the world sort of fits into a very symmetrical pattern. If you want to do something completely alien, then it has to be asymmetrical. Is that?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I see it as like a movement being conducted by a definitive asymmetry, because like if you were to say that things are symmetrical and it's like things are perfectly mirrored on one side or the other, then it's like there's not going to be much in the way of difference. Everything is going to be pretty flat and smooth, and nothing's going to be going on. But if there is a definitive contrast, for example, black fading into white, then you could imagine that one of these values would be trying to, in a way, correct the other side so that it can convey some sort of change. And that's kind of what I see motion kind of operating as. A shift from one end to another in a certain sort of way. Now, describing motion in that way is kind of basic, and I think just about everyone can observe that sort of thing. So I tend to, or at least currently, I'm putting a bit of a spin on it, and it's that motion has to have some sort of not so much of a goal, perhaps a kind of nature to it. Like, what is motion generally just sort of doing whenever things are happening at all? And I surmise that it's just sort of a simple command this can be interpreted as a like a programmatic or an algorithmic sort of way, but the command would just simply be to resolve, and it would just be like when something is moving, some sort of lack is being smoothed over, is being corrected or solved or something like of that sort. Yeah.
And you can't use entropy to explain that away.
Oh, you totally can. I mean, it's
Okay.
kind of the same basic principle there.
I'm like, because I mean, immediately made me think of sort of like the drop of ink in water, right?
Yeah.
You put a drop of ink in water, and there is movement as the molecules sort of spread through the water, and it's moving from organization to disorganization. And do
Yes.
you see the movement happening from organization to disorganization, or are there other factors here?
I tend to not see it in that way exactly. Well, I tend to redefine or reinterpret how nature seems to move from the entropic way of seeing things, I suppose. It's like one could say that it's moving from simplicity to complexity. That's one way of seeing it. Another way of seeing it is that, or at least within my own terms, it would be from evenness into sharpness, from flatness into difference, something of that sort.
Oh, can you go into that in
Yeah.
a little more detail? Like simplicity, because if you ask me, entropy is the opposite. It's going from a complexity to simplicity, but you're telling me that things are moving towards complexity, and where do you see that happening?
Yeah, it's well, if we consider the beginning of the universe, how I tend to imagine it is that it's like, yeah, okay, if you suppose that there is a basic state where the Big Bang just sort of just was, where everything was just mostly homogeneous, there wasn't much going on, and then it just sort of all expanded everywhere all at once, and it just kind of became differentiated in that sort of way. It's like it was once homogeneous, and now there are just these small dots here and there that can stand in as galaxies, and then stars, and then planets, and uh, other stellar masses, and the like. And then you have upon Earth these really, really intricate things like life forms,
Hmm.
and it just
And they went
yeah.
from one-celled creatures all the way to complex creatures. Is that kind of
Yeah,
what you're alluding
exactly.
to? Okay.
Yes, it is just generally becoming more intricate, for lack of a better word. Yes.
So why do you think that is? Why, like you said, it sounds as if you said that there is is there some kind of a physical force causing this to occur, or what's what's making this happen?
Yeah, I would. It's like, yeah, you could say entropy. Of course, that's like the easiest way to like
But entropy
just
is the opposite. It's not. It's creating simpler molecules because the things are breaking down. But it sounds like you're also saying that there's a force that's making things more complicated, more complex. So there's an extropic force that's moving in the opposite direction that's somehow creating new things that are more complex.
extropic, extropic. I'm blanking out on extropic and entropic. It's mostly because I don't use these terms
Well, entropy,
particularly. But
everything
yeah,
is dissolving into simpler and simpler particles as time goes by. So life forms they live, they die, and then they dissolve into particles. So that's sort of like the natural course of events. People think of time's arrow. Things are moving in that one direction where things are getting towards entropy. And then there's other thought leaders who talk about extropy, which is sort of the opposite of entropy, where life itself causes entropy to halt and reverse itself into extropy, where things become more complex and there's less dissolution when things become entropic. So it sounds as if what you're saying that there's some kind of tension between those two forces.
yeah, in a way. I thought that was negentropy or something, but,
It could be.
I don't know. But yeah,
Extropy sounds like shorter and easier to say. So
fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. If those are the same thing, then yes, absolutely. Yeah. Um, yeah, that's in a way kind of what I was figuring. I mean, when I moved into this sort of train of thought, I did start with entropy and I suppose extropy. as a form of, if you want to consider the arrow of time, things just sort of diverging away and flattening out and simplifying, and then you have this opposing effect that happens, along this arrow of time, where things just sort of go from simplicity down into, compression and things like that. That's kind of where I was coming from, a form of convergence and divergence, and that's kind of just how I describe, simple motion, but moving into like the concept of resolving and resolution, that is kind of where the theological bend tends to come from. But that is,
so these things don't move on their own. There's some external force that makes it happen.
Yeah, I surmise so. And I wouldn't say that it's like a sort of, at least not right now. I'm still kind of hashing things out at the moment. But it is like indeed, a principle that, you can consider this to be like a basic law of how things seem to operate. But yeah.
So you don't believe, coming back to the thing at the beginning, what you were describing, is that we live in a simulation. So
No,
a lot of this,
not entirely.
okay, because we would need to be able to see what's driving it, right? Because if we live in a simulation, then whatever's driving the simulation is outside of the simulation and we can never access it. But you're
Yes.
saying that we can't live in a simulation because there is something driving us and we can see it.
Yep.
And what is that?
Yeah. Everyone would see different aspects of the world. I personally focus on motion, and because it's just seemingly very ubiquitous and hard to get underneath in any reasonable sense. It's like, yeah, I could say difference is the thing that's causing that, but of course you can't really answer why there's difference, so you have to kind of draw a line somewhere. But
Right.
it's it's all about in a way how someone's cognition seems to take in the world and how it's been in a way ordered for them to see what they think what the world is made of, or how it's being conducted, or what the fundamental thing or the most important thing to focus on is. And I do think it is motion for me personally. Yes.
And when you talk about motion, I think a lot of people believe that there's things that are not in motion, but everything is in motion.
Yeah.
Right. There's nothing that is static right now. Absolutely nothing. Even if it looks like it's static, it's not static.
Yep, exactly. And it's curious too, because you're able to get really close to inducing stasis through, bringing things down to the temperature of absolute zero. And that's, about as static as things could possibly be. But of course, humans can't really get it there yet. They probably will never touch it because it seems like it's an asymptotic sort of thing. But it's
Kind of like the speed of light. Like we'll never reach
yeah.
that either in that direction.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of similar to the concept of stasis at that point. Well, you'd still be moving, of course, but that's when all of your material just sort of flatlines, and then it just sort of you
That's right.
can't do
Physical
much about
matter
it.
ceases to exist in the form that it's in as you get closer and closer to the speed of light.
Exactly. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think I went off on a slight tangent, but
No, it's good.
Yes.
Tangents are good. I love tangents.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't quite answer the question, but yes, here we are.
No, we're still traveling. We're still traveling the land. So just
True.
like, what's the next guidepost?
Right. Next guidepost. Okay, so that's resolving, that's resolution. So, and I did cover difference a little bit. I guess to take not necessarily a step forward, but like maybe one step back, I would say that, well, it kind of goes back into difference here, and this is where it does get into the theological part of it. But it does seem that motion, if we want to start with motion, that is, you can start with anything you wish. The fact that it is here kind of tells me, or at least it gives me a bit of an intuition that it is preferred that it is here as opposed to not here. And I find that an interesting concept. It's like, the world could have been in any other configuration, but this one is apparently the one that was favored. Now, when I use the word favored and preferred and all of that, it assumes that there's some sort of a conscious agent just sort of deciding these things. Again, I'm not entirely okay with that concept right now. It could still very much change, but yeah, because it's like it's kind of like trying to imagine that an imagination is happening outside of the world, and it's like, well, it would have to still be included in the world in some way, or maybe I would have to have some sort of other dimension in which that is included in the totality of the world. But you know,
But we still have to, that still have to be visible to us, right? Because it's not outside of the realm of our observation.
true. It's something that you kind of have to notice. Maybe it doesn't have to come in through your basic, five senses. But then again, you could also say that emotion and all of that is a form of touch, or some sort of internal, from the inside out sort of touch. But I don't know. I'll work things out in that direction eventually.
Well, we're all trying to figure it all out, so it makes
That
total
is
sense.
very true. Yeah. But yes, it is. It seems like it's sort of preferred that things are in the way that they are, and it does seem that motion in itself was generally preferred. In a, if you were to observe it from a human perspective, and to project that emotional capacity upon some sort of hypothetical creator. Yes.
So do we have free will in that scenario?
This is also one that I'm still puzzling out. I lean more towards no. It doesn't seem necessary to have one, or to have free will. But also, if you like go running straight at the very extremes of determinism, it's like, well, it kind of doesn't matter at that point. It's like, well, all
Exactly.
of your emotions, all of the feeling of free will, the feeling of agency, that's all kind of embedded within you by whatever force. So, you know,
But
for whatever
can
reason,
we?
that's preferred.
So let's say we have. I mean, personally, I believe in both. I believe
Hmm.
that we do have free will, but within a deterministic box,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And the thing is that you were talking about movement. It's like how much can we personally as human beings affect that movement?
It's yeah, I would say that it's a matter of exacting your own agency. I mean, that's kind of the limitations there. If you can move your body, you can use that movement to move other things. That's
Hmm.
about the extent of that. Then again, if you want to take it out to more of a universal perspective, you could say that you just kind of existing has an effect on everything else too, because everything is very much fitting together in such a way that if you move in any slight way, everything else around you has to move in, to um, what's the I don't to well fit that. We'll say that.
Right.
Yes.
So there's no alternate universes. This is just a single universe.
Yeah, yeah. That's how I see it anyway. I whenever I look at multiverses and possible timelines and all of that, it's like, well, that's just a product of the imagination. The imagination is just it's able to conjure those different possibilities. It's a way to make decisions.
Right.
It's yeah.
Because people are imagining that. So let's go back to something you talked about before with symmetry. When you were
Mhm,
talking about symmetry, and I think it's interesting that you mentioned that because it is true, right? There does seem to be sort of a yin and yang, and a black and white, and
mhm.
there seems to be a lot of symmetry in the world. I'm not sure if it's an Earth thing or a universal thing, but why do you think that is? Why do you think we have that symmetry, this sort of good and evil, yin and yang going on?
Uh, the basic answer is, of course, you could always answer with some sort of basic answer, of course. But yeah, it starts off with difference. Difference seems
Mm.
to be kind of necessary in this world. Why? Who can say?
But it's
Who
almost
can
like a
really
balance, right?
say?
It's almost like every
Yeah,
things have to be balanced. Like there
that
has to
things do have
be
to be
it
balanced.
everything's like a it's not a duopoly, but it's like
Mm,
everything's got to come in twos and everything sort of seems to match up against everything else. Nothing seems to come in any other form, and it just seems, is it something that's natural, or is it something that's universal, or
Well, it's interesting because one could say that it's like, oh, humans are the only people that would be able to notice and identify and label the concept of symmetry. But it's like, well, okay, that originates in the human brain, but then you trace it back, and it's like, well, other life forms could probably imagine the exact same thing, or not really imagine per se, but identify that there are symmetries in the world.
right?
And then you can just keep tracing that back further and further. But of course, you can just if you just keep imagining, well, no, if you approach the world in any particular way, you will notice, probably, depending on your sensory organs, that you will, that there are, indeed, that nature is just kind of set up in that way. There's a structure to it. And why that structure is the way that it is, it's, well, it's a consequence of how things seem to move and how they want to move.
Mhm.
It is a very curious thing. It's like I could always try and imagine how the world seems to be sort of evolving in real time, but it's like in order to really have answers as to why things are symmetrical, you kind of just have to roll back the clock from the beginning and watch it from beginning to now. And that's kind of untenable.
So whenever one force came up, an opposing force had to come up against it,
I
or are we just perceiving that?
Well, both really. We're perceiving that force. Now, the interesting thing about forces is that you don't even need a counter force. From my my general explorations, it seems that if you just draw one line, you already have the symmetry innate in that. It's a some sort of object here is moving from here to here. There is an immediate difference between that motion. It's like there's something here and something's no longer on this side now.
Right. So you've
It's,
already created
yeah, it's like
a
from
split.
one motion, boom, it's there. It's just a straight trajectory. It's already there.
Well, it's almost like
And
all of our actions have to create that then, because
yes,
there's always
exactly.
an equal and opposite reaction in physics. So is that where your background is? Are you physics? Is that your background, or what's your background? How did you get to where you are today?
Oh yeah. Oh, geez. It's I guess it's not as complicated or dramatic as I might be making it out to be, but it's I have always been interested in the natural sciences, even from a young age. I've always been, I guess I mostly came out of the womb drawing and making art, and the science was just a secondary thing. It kind of underpinned the things that I used to, or I guess the things that I still generally draw and think about. Yeah, it's background wise, I went to college for graphic design and illustration. College didn't work out. I only got about a year and a half in before, financial issues came about and I couldn't continue. And then I just sort of went about my own path. And after a couple of jobs here and there, I got one at a warehouse where I was able to show up early. And I had like an hour or two of alone time where I would just walk around the warehouse thinking. And
So you're
and
you're a creative philosopher, but you also
seemingly.
at one point you went into, I mean, you didn't go into physics or anything like that. So you're more of a
No.
creative philosopher. That's where you are right now.
Yeah, it's the natural sciences have always interested me, and I guess that set the groundwork for me being interested as to how on earth this world was made. Yeah. Because I think it's an important thing to ask, especially if you're an artist.
Well,
Because
yeah,
if you
I
could,
mean,
yeah,
but
if you
you're asking the
understand how,
philosophical questions, right? You're asking the
yeah,
philosophical questions about how the world was made. So do you have any answers? Or are we
do I
still
have answers?
coming?
Mm,
Are we still full of questions?
I'm constantly trying to answer, and in my answers, I constantly critique my own answers, and that's I guess that's my way of asking
You know what they say
questions to
about the
myself.
unexamined life. You're examining yourself. That's perfect.
Exactly. Exactly. I've just been doing that for the past 5 or so years. And I've gotten very, very decent at critiquing my own worlds. Yes.
Nice.
Yeah. Do I have answers? I can answer all day, but it's like it's probably never going to be sufficient or satisfactory enough to a lot of people. So at the moment, I'm going through a bit of a trend of just having very overly convenient and boring answers, like deliberately so. Like the concept of resolution is like, oh yeah, it resolves itself. It makes itself happen because it needs to. It's a product of cognition. That's how human brains work. They solve problems, thus resolve.
So the resolution is resolution.
Yep,
Basically.
the resolution is the resolution.
A is A. That works
Yeah.
really well.
Yeah. And I'm finding that if you just pick some sort of verb that can be applied to many things, you more or less win the game because it'll motivate you into doing whatever that verb happens to be. And
Interesting.
if
You just solved the entire success industry right there. You just attach yourself to a verb and you're all set.
Yeah, essentially, that's what you gotta do.
Well, like, give me
yeah.
a good verb. Like, what's a good verb to attach yourself to?
Personally, I picked resolve. Anyone could pick just about anything. I am developing a map of cognition. Maybe we can get into that a bit later, but I guess there are about right now there are 7 verbs all about human that make up human cognition for the sake of convenience. So I think it was sort of going up the chain here. It was sensing and feeling and intuiting, imagining, then reasoning, choosing, and conducting. And yeah, I find that from the patterns that I see in people generally, they kind of hover within a certain range and they're always just kind of doing those particular things more than the other ones, and there's going to be an offset of if someone's doing one thing they're going to be kind of terrible at doing another one, and it also seems to sort of give a sort of credence to what their general worldview or how their inner world is kind of structured as well, and I find that generally pretty interesting. But yeah,
If somebody is in one of those. If someone is primarily in one of those verbs, is it difficult for them to move to the others?
Consciously, I mean, they can do it. Everyone does have at least some basic sense of how to use all of them. It's just a matter of well, yes, preference, and also how comfortable it is for them to be in those mental states, if you will.
Right.
Yeah. It's like, for example, I'm someone that's kind of somewhere in imagining, somewhere in intuiting. I reason a little bit here and there, but it's those are the places I'm most comfortable in. Now, because of that, I will be not so good at conducting and sensing, which would, conducting is, getting out there into the world and doing things. But, at the same time, when you are conducting, you're also sensing at the same time, which is, just
but to a smaller degree as you would be sensing if you were more
Yes.
of into the sensing space. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And, there's a bit of inertia there. I am one to spend a lot of time in my own head, but, not someone that will be just blitzing through reality and making things happen like someone else on that side of the spectrum. And then if you go down into feeling, primarily someone that feels, they're going to be noticing a whole lot of things, and they're probably going to want to just sort of play around with the things that they notice. I'll have to map that out a little bit more clearly and succinctly, but I think you have a sense of what I mean in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So have you mapped that all out and those different verbs that you're talking about? And it sounds to me that human beings need to have competency in all of those areas to a certain degree. And as you grow competency in all of the areas, the more areas you grow competency in, the more well-rounded you become as a human being, or the more
Yeah.
effective.
Pretty much, yeah. It's there's not much that will really um leave you you wouldn't be really just caught off guard in many circumstances, and you'll be able to be kind of mercurial and kind of fluid. You'll be able to move through things very very easily, and I find that humans tend to like like many life forms, they like to be adaptable. But yeah.
Well, we try to
We
be adaptable.
definitely
At least I
try.
think we try to be adaptable. Although there's some
Yeah,
people who
there are
don't.
some.
They don't
Yeah,
want to be
there's
They just sort of sit in their comfort zones, and they're like, "Oh, I'm a
yeah.
feeler, or I'm a sensor." And then, if you want to if you want to conduct, go right ahead. But you
Yep.
have to do it without me.
I'll be over here. Yep, exactly. Yeah, I do associate that with the reasoning types a lot of the time. They they're sticklers for rules and the like. Naturally, it's yeah, and they tend to not really go up into really leaning into their preferences, which does kind of require them to feel, which they tend to be averse to. But that's just how it is, you know. Yeah.
So of these verbs that you were talking about, how many of these are exclusively human, and how many of them are not?
That is, yeah. Now, that's something I've been considering lately too. It's to me, it seems like because this, I haven't given you like an image or a graph or chart of what this even looks like,
Well,
but
that's fine. I can
it's
picture it.
yeah, great. It's so from sensing to conducting, it's just this basically a chain.
Like a
That's like
continuum. It's like
yes,
okay.
kind of like a continuum. Yes.
Hmm.
Now because there are seven, it makes for an interesting symmetry in itself. So sensing and conducting, that is, those two coincide together. If you want to treat that as like the most basic thing of all, of like things are just basically moving because that's effectively what's going on. I have a different concept of what sensing is. It's more like a just a receptivity to change.
Mm,
It's in humans, it would be a matter of like this is before they even notice what has happened in the world itself. That's with the
so it's
moment
an
that they
autonomic response sort of thing.
yeah, in a way,
Mm,
yes. Yeah, it's yeah, basically just atoms and subatomic things just doing their thing and
right,
people not really being able to notice. Yeah.
right.
It's yeah, so conducting and sensing, those are the exact same thing. Well, they coincide. It is substance and the motion of the substance.
Hmm.
Then you move into choice and feeling. Feeling is right above sensing, and choice is right underneath conducting, and that is kind of the next layer of sorts. And it's that's when you start getting into structures that seem to in a way want certain things. If you want to get into like cells and the like, that's when it gets a little, that's probably where it kind of starts to develop a little bit more. Of course, they're not necessarily reasoning or intuiting just yet because they don't have those faculties, but that's kind of where it starts indeed moving into the cellular, or away from the molecular into the cellular and into the more aggregate forms.
Hmm.
Then you get into reasoning and intuiting. This is where you get your right. That's right. Reasoning and intuiting is the animal kingdom of sorts, and then the choice, the choosing, and the feeling kind of is like the plants and algae and things like that. Very very
Right.
simple intelligence in that way. Right, reasoning and intuiting, that's kind of just animals, and they have a little bit of that this fourth in the middle thing, imagination. They have a little bit of that, but not as much as humans seem to have. And yeah, so in a way this diagram just sort of makes a bit of a bow or a string along a bow. It's like the more you pull the string back, the more intelligent that
Mm.
pattern in a way becomes. And by pattern I mean general body in the world.
So reasoning, see, I would think that reasoning and imagination are things that are exclusively human,
Mhm.
but it sounds like you're saying that reasoning can be non-human.
Yeah, yeah.
Really?
Because yes, animals, other animals beyond humans definitely seem to reason, and in order to reason, you do seem to need to have some capacity to have concepts, or at least some basic form of memory to, just to have, some sort of internal content, a way to make associations and manipulate those associations. Reasoning, or I should say this, conducting and choosing and reasoning, all of those are kind of the motion axis, if you will. And let's see, sensing and intuiting, or feeling and then intuiting, those are the content, the physical stuff that is being moved around by motion. Yes.
Right. And those are so, like you said, elements of the natural world can take on all of them, right? There's nothing in that list that you've given me that's exclusively human, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Nothing is exclusively human. It's just a matter of how it all comes together. It's all about the structure in that sense. Yeah.
So somehow, how do we become the prime movers then?
How do we? Oh, that's. I don't think they can read. Now,
how many hours do we have? How many hours?
Hold on, let me.
We
check
may
the
need
time.
to do. We may need to do a longer. Another show for that.
It may need to be another one, but I have some sort of answer for that. But yes.
Oh man, this is great. So tell me a little bit more about the what we talked about at the very beginning. So we like to weave around with different things, but it's like, where are you going with your current thinking?
In what sense? Just the idea sense, or what I'm going to be?
Yeah. I mean, like when I saw your LinkedIn profile, I thought, oh, this guy is cool. I need to get him on my show. And I'm like, we're talking about all sorts of different things, but then we can let's align with what we started.
Yeah. Okay. The
ideas into action. I think that's what it was. I forget exactly what you had on the.
Oh, ideas into worlds that electrify the soul, or something
exactly.
of that effect.
I love that. I mean, it makes it like it really triggers a lot in me. This is great.
Yeah. So, okay, the general trajectory that I've been on for the past, I guess, 5 or 6 years at this point, is that I've just been making a whole bunch of worlds, and it started off as a fictional project. And then it became kind of metafictional. And then, in that metafiction was also, very innately philosophical. I tried to research as much as I can about the world itself, and I tried to compress all of that into a nice, neat little document. It is very messy, but it ended up half decent. Now, because of how intricate and complex it is, I didn't think that it would actually have much of an effect on anyone, because it took a lot of digging in order to get any sort of message out of it for the reader, it seems. But from the ones that did read it, they apparently just had their entire life turn around.
Nice.
I don't understand how that happened, but I guess that's just what art can do.
Well, you obviously something in that depiction resonated.
Yeah.
Right? Something resonated.
Yeah. And it makes sense, because in the fictional project, I was able to, while I was working on concluding that world, as it were, it got, it turned into a short film. And while I was editing that short film, multiple times through, I just kept crying. It just wouldn't stop.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah. It's I think everyone's art should at least do that to them at least once.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Now I have to see this film.
Yeah. It's, I'll send it to you after.
Please.
Yeah. It's quite something, but that's kind of where it started. Then it moved into the metafiction, which became a book. It was a book. And after that, it was just me trying to, I guess, reverse engineer how on earth I could make this this metafiction or philosophy a little bit better, to be more digestible. And it's not until now that I'm, kind of able to do that. And that's kind of what I'm doing right now. I'm just kind of taking this book in a way and fleshing it out in a little bit more of I wouldn't say necessarily simpler terms, but in a more elegant way, something that doesn't demand so many moving parts. Because my goodness, it was a mess when I was writing that thing.
Well, that's part of the creative process, right? It has to be,
Yep.
it has to go through the mess period
Yep, it
before it
has
turns
to.
into something beautiful.
Yes, very much so.
So the end product is going to be a book, or is it something else?
I tend to not like revisiting mediums that I've completed projects in.
Oh, that's it. You're done. You did a one
Yeah,
book, and now that's
I
it.
did. It's like
You're moving to it. Aren't you
I'm
going to run
out.
out of mediums at one point? You have to
I
come
will
up with some new
probably
ones.
run out eventually. I will have to revisit something.
Or you could just invent new mediums. That's it.
I
You'll have to.
yes. Like who needs these old ones? I'll just make new
Exactly.
ones.
We're done with these old medias because it's terrible. Books. Nobody reads books anymore anyway,
Like
right?
exactly. Just make like I don't know. I don't know what the next medium would be,
We'll
but
do
I'll
like
figure something out.
TikTok streams or something,
Yeah,
right?
TikTok streams. Just like 30-second snippets of
Yeah,
really
exactly.
deep mind-numbing philosophy.
It's like, oh, you just blew my mind in 30 seconds. I mean, if you could do that.
I'd have to go into advertising if I could do that. Oh my god.
Yeah, so you may have to revisit some media, but this is where you're going. It looks like it's book. So you're not doing book next. What do you? And you did book, you did film. What are you doing next?
I'm thinking it has to be interactive. I am well, I know that it can become that this sort of graph-esque sort of structure with the sensing and conducting. That can definitely be an app. I know that it can be. I'll have to learn coding, of course, but
No
it's
big.
yeah, no biggie.
With the no code movement and AI, you could probably
Exactly, yeah.
rip something out right
I
away.
did some research into it. I was like, okay, it seems doable, just not right now.
You might need to learn a little bit more.
Yeah,
Just
I
a
need
touch.
just a little bit. Yeah, code is a little inescapable, but that's okay. Maybe if I wait maybe 5 more years. No,
Eventually,
I'll
you'll just tell an AI coder, "This is what I want," and then boom,
Yeah.
the app just appears, right?
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So I want to play around with something interactive. I'm thinking of getting into, well, making games in sorts. That's something I did dabble with a little bit, but of course that's a little, well, it's indeed making a world, but it doesn't really, it's not like it's not deeply philosophical, I guess is what I'm trying
No,
to say.
but actually, I mean, I was just watching some older lectures by Seth Godin, and he was talking about how everything is a game. The world is a
True.
game,
Yeah.
and I think I think it's underrated as a representation of the reality that we live in,
Yeah.
right? And so maybe that's not so far off what
Yeah.
you need to
Like,
do.
and I do like games. I do have a history with those. Um,
And they're not just
yeah.
wasting time. I mean, you
Yeah.
learn.
Exactly, yeah. And because of how nuanced and deep I tend to make a lot of the things that I make, it's yeah, something will come of it. I know of that. Just yeah, not right now. Definitely later. Because
So speaking of later,
yeah,
it's 10 years from now. Remember, it's time to think like a futurist. It's the year
yes.
2034. 10 years from now, where will we be? Where will you be? What will be
Oh,
happening? Let's prognosticate.
yes. Well, I did put a little bit of thought into this question, and
Hmm.
every single time I think of the future, it's like, well, is it really going to change that? It seems like a lot of rapid change has occurred in like
I
20
love that
years.
answer. I love that answer because that answer is probably the closest thing to the truth that we're going to see. It's like
Yeah.
very little will change. I love
Yeah.
that answer. Nobody says that. Nobody. You're the
Nobody
first
says it
person.
really.
You're the first person to ever say it'll kind of be about the same. Like it won't change that
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, I don't think it will be. I don't know. Maybe going into it, I was like, I hope he doesn't expect me to be like hyper futurist because like I don't think I can do it. It's like
No,
I just
that's perfect because I think you're 100% right. Because each and every time we've done predictions about the future, we're always completely wrong, and we're always too optimistic about when things are going to happen, right? I mean, if you go back to something like the fax machine, I think the fax machine was invented in the 20s, and it eventually, and only in the 80s did it become ubiquitous, right? So
Yeah.
we have this optimistic view of the future. We think, oh, it's going to happen in 10 years or 5 years, and 20, 30 years later, it finally shows up.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, well, we were really wrong about the about when that was going
Yeah.
to happen. And that's why I like to say I have this stock phrase which I use. It's everything will happen. The only question is when, right? So these things, everything that we envision, as long as it's physically possible, will occur. The
Yeah.
question is when will it occur? And that is the $1 million question. Because if you knew when it was going to occur, then you would, you'd win every game. But you have no idea when it's going to occur. So you can predict, oh, for example, in 2007 I was working at Yahoo, and I created something called a futures program where we'd try to think about what would happen in 2017. And in 2007 we said we're going to have 3D printers. We didn't call them 3D printers, but uh, we said, things like 3D printers. And then 2017 came along, and we didn't really have 3D printers at the time. But so it eventually, like, things started occurring, but they occurred in a completely different timeline that we expected them to happen. And I think that's what's going to happen. And I think your answer of where we're going to be in 10 years is probably the most accurate answer I've ever had on this show. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm generally pretty conservative when it comes to technology. It's or at least projecting it forward. Now, if I want to, if I wanted to speculate a little bit, it's something that's been going on for, I don't know, again, for the past 20 years or so. It's just taking existing technology and just seeing how they can interweave with other existing technology. And then you
Right.
just kind of, it's not nothing particularly new. It just gets a little bit more refined. Maybe you get a few bundling, or rather, just bundling together a few functionalities into one singular thing. That's going to be happening a lot for the next 10 years.
Right. So
If
kind of
you
like
want to,
mashups, almost like what
yeah,
we used to call mashups. So I have a question about your map of cognition. I'm
sure.
assuming that's the map of cognition that you were talking about before.
Yeah.
How does that apply to AI? How many of those verbs can AI do or will be able to do?
So let me see. I think AI is able to effectively work within reasoning and intuiting.
Hmm.
Now, when it comes to reasoning and
Intuiting. I love that. That's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
I wouldn't expect. I wasn't going to expect. I wasn't expecting that verb.
yeah. It's like in order to reason, you do need to have at least some semblance of association. Now, does AI know what these associations are? Who can say? I would say no because it's just a language model of sorts, from what I understand. But
Hmm.
you need content in order to move about, and that's effectively what AI is, seemingly doing. Now that can probably mimic imagination, but will it be imagination? It's an interesting question. Reasoning and intuiting together, it's like if you're moving around associations, and uh, effectively that's kind of what animals tend to do, from what I can imagine anyway. It's like I guess what I'm trying to, get down into is that reasoning and intuiting together is imagination. That's kind of what I'm trying to say.
Hmm.
On what level will AI reach like human imagination or human imagining? Well, it'll probably be able to mimic what we can do, but it will just be, it's not going to get that far. At least I don't think so.
Oh, I don't
It'll
know.
be stifled. I don't know.
Uh,
I don't.
Imagination. It depends on what's your definition of imagination, though. I mean,
Yeah, it would within the map, it would definitely just be moving around associations in a certain way, having effectively a stream of thought.
mm,
That's the general byproduct of moving around all of these intuitions constantly. Yes.
hmm. Interesting. Interesting.
Will AI do that autonomously? I guess that's the question. Will AI reason its intuitions autonomously without input? That's kind of where I'm aiming at, I suppose. Yeah. Who can say if that would happen?
And the
It's
rest,
like,
no feeling. Obviously, no feeling.
uh, I don't know. It seems like you do need to have some capacity. Well, AI feeling is like it being prompted, I guess you could say, Or you could say that it's sensing. That's kind of what prompting is.
But then once you prompt, you're actually putting your feelings into it. So it's like it's
Yeah,
like
it's
you're
like
you're creating a
still,
cyborg.
yeah. It's like, will it do it without human input is the real question.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't see it happening.
Yeah.
No, it wouldn't be AI at that point, would it?
But then it's not AI by itself. It requires us to feed something into it for it to do its thing. So it
Yeah.
can't do anything autonomously without some seed from a human to start it
Yep.
off.
Pretty much. And
Yeah.
I mean, you could also say that, well, does a human being, if you can you have a human being without any sort of input? Well, I guess it wouldn't also technically be a human being. It would be closer to an animal at that point. But
Well, like I say, and if you ascribe to mimetic theory, then like everything that we are is something that we've copied from somebody else. So
yeah,
we're basically like AI. So we've got large language models built into our heads that
yeah,
we've
yeah,
observed over the entire course of our lives, and this is why we are the way we are. So
yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's interesting. I guess with AI, if it is any way analogous to human cognition, and I guess in a way it is because it's modeling. Or at least mimicking human cognition. Yeah, it'll function similarly, but of course not quite the same way because we can't make brains without giving birth to human beings. So
yet,
not yet. We can't. We will. We will definitely more than likely be able to synthesize human beings.
yes, at some point, at some
At
point.
some point.
Yeah.
It's definitely possible now, I would say, honestly, but
So anything else on your list that you think AI can and cannot do that we didn't cover?
um I wouldn't say so. I mean, with it being focused on how cognition works and how intelligence works, it's yeah, it'll be able to do just about everything that a human cognition would be able to do, except I tend to imagine cognition as more than just the mental faculties. It's also about genuine execution with a body and the like, and that's something AI is currently missing just a little bit. It doesn't really have a body that it can move. Once it can,
Right.
maybe it will be indistinguishable from a human, or at least it'll become closer or more able to become indistinguishable
Yeah.
from a human being. Yeah.
And that's part of being human is having a physical self,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you can't. So that's what I'm thinking about, like people talking about transhumanism and uploading your psyche into machines and stuff like that. Do you cease to be human once you've removed yourself from a body?
Yeah. It's you cease to be human once you remove yourself from a body. It's yeah, you definitely become definitely something other than human, unless you want to consider that this detached intelligence of sorts still contains that notion of you being a human being. But of course, it's like if that separate organless body is able to imagine and think and reason in the same ways without a human body, then it's like, well,
It could even be made to perceive itself as being still human.
yeah,
Right.
very true, exactly. And it's like, well, what then is the human form? What is the human body? It's kind of, it's nothing without its concepts, I guess.
That's right. So humans do not exist without concepts. I love it.
Yeah, seemingly. It's like it's
Well,
just
this
a
is
shell.
yeah, just a shell, just a shell. Like, so this has been great. Thank you so much. I love this conversation. We should do more of them for sure.
Yes.
And so if someone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
You could find me on LinkedIn. My name is Branden Singletary. That is Branden, not Owen, naturally. And on Twitter, you can find me at Nexumorphic, which is NEXUMORPHIC.
Nice.
And yeah.
And I'll put links to all these things in the show notes. And if you have links to your movie and your book and anything else you want to, please share, and I'll put them in the show notes below so that people can easily get to them. So
Awesome.
this has been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, likewise.
We'll
Thanks for
definitely
having
talk
me.
again. We'll definitely talk again.
Yes, we got it.
All right, sir. Talk to you later.
Yep.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.
Pixels and philosophies merge and mold, a future untold, unseen.